Welcome in to a very incredibly special edition of Bear and Balance, or barely a podcast brought to you by Bear and Balance. I don't know what we're going to call this, but the reason behind this on Black Friday is that the Chicago Bears, for the first time in their 105-year history, have fired their head coach in season. Matt Eberflus is no longer the head coach of the Chicago Bears after yet another coaching debacle where they had an opportunity to win a game and they did things in the Matt Eberflus way to find a way to lose them. Lester Wiltfong is joining me on the other side of the screen because this is a big deal. So how you feeling? And yeah, let's dig into this thing.
Why in the hell would this incompetent organization allow Flus to have his regularly scheduled Zoom call with the media? I mean, that is like Trestman era level. That's like fake press conference era level of bullshit that this organization does time and time again. It makes no sense to me.
So for those of you that don't follow this stuff quite as closely as we do, the day after press conference was held by Zoom, 9:00 schedule. All the beat writers were saying like, hey, we haven't been confirmed or told that this isn't happening. But stay tuned. There is no link. And then they sent the link like at 9:00 or maybe a couple minutes after. But then when they stepped in, they said, we don't know who's going to be here yet. and then we got a screenshot. I mean, I saw it from Pat Finley first, and a couple other people shared the screenshot of Eberflus. And then it was like, okay, well, he's not fired. He's here. So there we go. And it sounds like they were allowed to continue their morning as normal. They went through a coaches meeting, and then Eberflus informed the rest of his staff that he had been let go at 11. And of course, no media availability for a while, right? They're not going to be media availability for a couple days. So now you've got this sort of delayed firing where, you're not going to address it as a team until a couple days from now.
Dumb. I just understand. The whole thing makes no sense. It's like there was a small part of me, right? When I think it was Courtney Cronin said that that Flus said he has another meeting scheduled later today. So I wrote an article like after it came out that they were keeping him, right? So I'm like, I eviscerated the franchise. I'm like, again with this stuff. But I put on the very bottom, like, there's a small glimmer of hope because he has a meeting scheduled. But what was said at this meeting that wasn't said last night when Poles and Warren met with Flus? Like what changed from then till now? What changed from the 9 a.m. Zoom call to their meeting? It's idiotic that they would trot him out there and say, hey, business as usual, go talk to him. I mean, Flus even said, I plan on being the coach for the Niners game. What? Come on, dude.
Yeah, I think you just cancel the Zoom meeting at that point. Like, what's the point of doing that at all? Or you have to have Ryan Poles just show up to the Zoom meeting and say, we've relieved Coach Eberflus of his duties or whatever. I think you just push the stream though. You push the Zoom meeting. You say, we're canceling it. We're not going to do it today. And you give Flus the opportunity to address his coaches, address his team, whatever you want to let him do. But because I think the 9 a.m. scheduled Zoom call became an inconvenience at some point. Like, they probably were like, oh crap, we still have to do this thing. What are we going to do here? Because if you put Poles in front of there, that it's already happened. And if he hasn't addressed his team yet, so maybe there's a little bit of like the niceties there. But, and I don't feel bad for Matt Eberflus because we've been killing this guy on this on our show for the last couple of years because of all of the new and creative ways that he finds to lose football games. But it is something to have to go in front of the media and pretend like, everything is okay and knowing that you don't have the job anymore.
Was he pretending? Or did he?
Do you think they
fine?
Do you think that they fired him after he got off the Zoom call?
Well, that was the report was they were going to have a meeting after the call. Flus said he had a meeting with Warren and Poles later in the day, which I'm assuming happened at some point. So I mean, look, if I'm told I'm fired, right? But hey, still go in front of the Zoom and play nice. I'm like, F you. You know what I mean? Like, Does he have any balls at all? Like, why would he agree to that? This is what I'm thinking. There's no way. He had to have thought he was cool. He had to have thought it was fine. And then he had his meeting, and they're like, yeah, we're going to make a change. It's just, yes, Chris, I had this exact same thought when I had the press conference today, that I could have swore Emery did something. It's just idiotic. It's just Bearsy. It's more Bears BS.
So let's talk about the game a little bit. Now we've have just a little bit. We'll talk about it a lot on Monday on our normal
guys.
time.
Real quick, Mason did a post-game podcast earlier this morning. So if you want to get more in depth on the actual game itself, that's on our feed somewhere. Find that. It's Mason's post-game game pod.
I don't want to talk about the whole game. I just want to talk about the sequence.
The sequence, yes.
And specifically what I think, I guess, was the straw that broke the camel's back, right? I mean, it had to have been. So because the reality is the Bears were in a football game that no one gave them a chance for. They were 10 and a half point underdogs going into Detroit. Detroit is a buzzsaw. They look like the best team in the NFC. Like they're, if they're anything short of a Super Bowl appearance, I think is a disappointment for them, right? Like that's the level that they're competing at. And so for the Bears to go in, and they looked dreadful in the first half, right? They kept themselves in it by not allowing touchdowns, but they had a chance to win this football game. And they had a completed pass inside the red zone, and it was setting them up. They're at worst, they were going to tie this game, take it to overtime. Tevin Jenkins gets called for a penalty. Okay, hands to the face. It was a penalty. It wasn't like one of those phantom things that you can complain about. Tevin Jenkins punched the guy's helmet off. Yeah. Now you're at, 2nd and 20 or whatever it was. You take the sack. You have one timeout. And you take a sack. Your receivers are downfield. That's just the way it is. And so those guys have to come back. Your quarterback has to pick himself up off the ground. He's got to get a play call in. He's got to get it called. He's got to get his guys set, and he's got to run the play. Or you spike the timeout. And I'm watching it at a Thanksgiving get-together. There's 30 people with various levels of interest in a football game. None of the other people are Bears fans, so they're not really most of them are just rooting against the Bears for no reason other than probably my presence, right?
Just you, yeah.
And the clock keeps ticking. And I'm like miming timeout. Like I'm looking around like for somebody to confirm with me that I'm not crazy. Like, spike your timeout. I'm staring at the little crawler. Like, do they not have a timeout? I thought they had one left. Like, what's happening here? You have to call a timeout here. Time runs down to the point where I'm saying, well, this is the last play of the game. Yeah. Like, you're not going to get this off and be able to call a timeout. Sure enough, it's the last play of the game. They cut to Flus, and Flus is kind of looking around like he thinks he's got a play left. What are you doing? Like, to me, that was coaching 101. And I've seen some people like try to honestly answer the question, like on social media and Twitter. Well, what you do is you call the timeout, and then, you can rush your field goal unit onto the field as you get it closer, tie the game, whatever. And it's like, yeah, this is not insight. Like, this is coaching 101 stuff. And so to me, you have example number 84 of how this guy doesn't actually know how to be a head coach. So that's like the ridiculous fireable offense to me. And then you get the press conference. Do you think that the press conference matters or not?
The one this morning?
Right after the game.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was some insight given by Caleb about well, first off, Flus doubled down.
Flus is part of the press conference. That's what I'm asking.
Moron. I mean, he doubled down, said he did the right thing. Like, I'm like, come on, dude. You talk about the straw that broke the camel's back. This is like a pack of 100 straws you get at Walmart. This is what this is. There have been so many straws. This guy is just a boob. I mean, there's no if and buts about it. The whole thing with Flus just made no sense to me. Doubling down on it made no sense to me. But like I said, we got some insight from Caleb. And look, in the heat of the moment, I understood fans mad at Caleb in the heat of the moment, right? Why does he call the timeout? Well, look, he's got stuff going on, right? I mean, he's got to get his guys lined up. He's waiting for, assuming his head coach will make that call here. I guess the play call came into him when he finally got it. There was already like 20 some odd seconds left. He got the play, and it makes me wonder, did Thomas Brown expect Flus to call a timeout? because that play call,
I think, oh, it was a timeout, right?
yeah, because the play call, according to what Caleb was, he knew that play call wasn't enough based on the time they had left in the clock. So he is aware, right? He's in the game. He's in the moment. He's understands situational football. He gets to play in his headset. He gets it called. He looks at the clock. He realizes, well, this play's not going to work based on the time we have left. So it's third down, right? They had no time. At that point, it was end zone shot. Here we go. Change the play, chucks it down to Rome. Ball game.
So my point about Flus's comments is that we have this pattern of behavior where he will not take responsibility, and he'll double down, and and he does it again. And then there was a little bit of like throwing the Caleb under the bus
today too.
Well, and so you wonder if this guy's just like, is he just dumb? Like, I mean, like, does he not understand the coaching part? He definitely doesn't understand the media part. Does he think he's saving himself? Does he think he's fooling anybody? Like, what is this? I guess he's not our problem anymore. But it's just such a fascinating thing to see someone who's so bad at multiple parts of being a head coach. I don't think he ever understood that he wasn't a coordinator anymore. And I want to remind people that this guy was hired. This guy was hired to be the CEO type head coach. Like, he did not call plays at first. Like, he didn't call plays the first year, and he was only pressed into calling plays as a defensive coordinator because his defensive coordinator was, I don't know what happened, escorted out of the building. We still don't know exactly what was happening there, right? In year 2, right? So I don't know. There was a little bit of a changing narrative that, like, well, he's brought in because he's a good defensive play caller and he's a good. It's like, well, no, it's actually, he was brought in to like change the culture, and he might be the worst culture coach that I've ever. I mean, like, I know the Trestman era burned out fast, and he was clearly just not an NFL caliber coach. You just can't hire a guy from the CFL, I guess, to come back in the NFL as a head coach. So that was a failed experiment. That was bad. That burned out fast. This guy shows less situational awareness than Trestman ever did, though. And Trestman's the guy that kicked a field goal on second down.
Trestman also addressed the team with his back to the team. That Trestman era was bad. So anytime somone says, "Oh, this is the worst era," I mean, it may be in the same ballpark, but that Trestman era was pretty bad. But this whole thing with Flus, I remember when he was hired, there were rumors, out of Indianapolis that towards the end of the Colts season, he had kind of checked out because he was prepping to do these head coach interviews because he was a hot candidate at the time. He had just had a really good year in Indy, one of the up and coming guys. And, there was some rumors that he kind of checked out and was focusing more on his head coach's personal endeavors rather than the team. Right. There was some rumors then. No one really liked the hire at the time, but again, that's hindsight. We were calling for the firing last year. That's hindsight. He's gone now. The Flus has been flushed. Finally has happened. Thomas Brown, he gets the gig now. Offensive coordinator. He went from passing game coordinator to OC to head coach in a span of 3 weeks. Look, he interviewed for the OC job. He didn't get it. But they brought him on as passing game coordinator. Look, Caleb and the offense has looked better since he's taken over. How will this change things moving forward now that he's also CEO guy?
Yeah, it's very interesting because let's start by at least just saying that Caleb Williams now owns a rookie record, most consecutive passes without throwing an interception. It started in the Jacksonville game, which was a good game before the bye. Obviously, he had some bad games, and that led to Shane Waldron being fired, but he did not throw an interception in those games. And then he has picked it up and thrown the ball pretty well. Even yesterday, where the completion percentages was down, particularly early on in the game, that nothing was working. None of the routes seemed to be coming open. I think he was 5 for 15 at one point.
Yeah.
And so, not looking good, but he broke the record and continued that interceptionless streak against a team that has been taking the ball away frequently. And he was able to get 3 touchdown passes. And you might say, well, I'm sure the Lions have been giving up touchdown passes because, they've been carrying these big leads. And so they're, but no, my friends. Like he's the first quarterback to throw more than one touchdown pass against them, I believe. Every other team has either thrown one or zero. So he's continuing to fight and keep this team in games. Like, I mean, this they're so close. If not for the inept coaching, we could be having a very different conversation. And this is what leads you to fire your coach in season for the first time in 105 years. It's also a fun thing to say. Oh, they've never done
Is
it
it
in 105
105 or
years.
104? I got to check my math. I think I wrote 104 earlier today.
1920 is the first season, so like so 1999 would have been like so then you gotta, the zero counts as the new decade, right?
I'm gonna have to
So
go edit my
I
article
think
then.
this is the 105th season. And part of that story though is that George Halas was the coach for 40 of them, and bounced in and out in different ways, and so that you can't really start counting it until George Halas stepped away for the last time, in my opinion, right? Like, he didn't fire a coach in season, during his chairmanship, I guess. But this was the time to break it, because I think that one thing we haven't touched on, and maybe we should talk a little bit more about Thomas Brown, but like the locker room did seem to be just completely drifting and lost. There, just the guys' comments on social media. You've got Jaquan Brisker. Just,
oh man,
he's
gives
very
zero
open about how much he doesn't like it. You heard from Keenan Allen yesterday. I think you can read between the lines on some of the things that Caleb Williams was saying. Just about the situational football. Like, you can, as a football fan, you can take that information and say like, okay, this coaching staff clearly isn't supporting you, and putting you in a position to succeed. But at some point, you just got to you got to respond to the players and do them a service. They have to go out there and play, another 5 football games. So, let's give them a chance to not have to overcome dumb coaching decisions to win a football game at some point at the end of this year. And then Thomas Brown's going to take over as the interim coach. Do you like that, or would you have preferred him to stay as the OC and like this is what you're doing? You're just focusing on offensive coordinator duties, or do you like the idea of giving this guy a little bit of a job, an extended job interview, I guess, to be able to see, are you head coaching material?
I think they should have wanted to go in a different direction and let Thomas Brown stay what he's doing, stay up in the booth, stay calling plays for Caleb, let him focus on Caleb. I mean, Caleb's the future, right? I mean, this season's lost. It's been lost. Caleb's development is all that matters right now. So I would have rather they let Thomas Brown do what he was doing, give the gig to Hightower, give the gig to John Hoke, longtime, NFL assistant, college assistant, maybe give it to Washington. There were other options on this staff. The fact they're giving it to Brown, that tells me that they think he's a viable candidate to be the head coach going forward. Which, look, if he comes out and then he starts kicking ass, right, and the players are loving it, and they like his message, they're digging it, I think he should 100% be a candidate. But this would be so Bears.
Who do you think is the most successful interim coach to eventually become a head coach?
Oh man.
So sorry. I think I set you up for a question that there's no way that you could come up with an answer quickly. But okay. the guy that comes to mind for me is Dan Campbell, because he was interim coach in Miami.
Yes.
But then he took additional years to get that chance in Detroit, right? That was a pretty big gap between when he got to finish out the season as an interim and then take over for the Lions. So I think it's a nice opportunity anytime you get something like this, but I don't think that this means that he's definitely going to get the job, even if he does well. But I think it gives him an opportunity to show what he has, yes. And it gives the Bears an opportunity to say, like, okay, like is this someone that the team is like, yes, this is our guy? Or do you go in? I think you still have to do a full panel interview. Like, I think you still have to go through the process. You have to interview Ben Johnson. You have to interview some of these other offensive line, Liam Cohen. Like, you have to go out there and interview some of these guys that have shown sustained success in their play calling role, because that's the other thing too. Let's say that the last 5 games look pretty good for Caleb Williams in this offense, and Thomas Brown has able to do some things. It's still only a half of year of tape and information. And so the problem with that is your stuff gets figured out as there's more tape. And so what are your counters? What are you doing to respond when a defense comes out and starts taking away your stuff? And it's hard to evaluate off of only a half of year. And so Ben Johnson now has many years, and he just actually keeps getting better, which is a really encouraging, because one, those players are in the system more, and they're playing together more and all that. But that's a really good sign that that's a sustainable success. There's a lot of guys that'll burn through all their stuff and then they get figured out and it just kind of peters out, right? So that's what I worry about a little bit, is that if the Bears put too much stock into this, you really only have about a half of a year, and he might do something completely different for next year. Maybe this is not his ideal system. He's just here to help out and run it or whatever. But that would be my worry if it all works out really well for Thomas Brown and they end up going with him. But I would say that Bill Zimmerman brought up the point that if you're seriously going to give this guy an interview and not just a courtesy interview, then this is real data that you can obtain that's within your power. And if you don't take advantage of this and you hire him, and then it turns out that he makes doofus decisions like the last guy, then that was something that you could have prevented. So I do like that argument, even if I probably would have focused. I would have done the same thing you said. I would have elevated Richard Hightower because as a special teams coordinator, that's kind of the easy thing to do, because he kind of knows everybody on the squad. And then you let your coordinators just focus on their side of the ball. And the most important thing right now is to get through these last 5 games with Caleb hitting the offseason with some momentum and some positive vibes, and go from there. But I think Bill's right that you do get some additional information that you wouldn't get otherwise.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like I said, he is a viable option. I mean, look, Thomas Brown, before this whole Bears debacle here, he was a pretty hot coaching candidate. He was on a lot of the lists of up and coming coaches. A couple years ago, a couple cycles ago, he was interviewed for head coaching jobs around the league. He ended up taking a gig with Carolina as their assistant head coach, OC. Frank Reich, of course, was the play caller there. Carolina was a mess. That didn't work out. I mean, in hindsight, again, that was probably a bad decision for Brown to take that gig. But it was a higher position than he had in LA. He looked at it as a step up, and then now he's in Chicago and he's got a chance. The ultimate step up where he's got a nice audition, and it's not just for the Bears. Like you said, it's for the whole league. If he does a great job here, and the Bears go through the whole interview process, which they should, Thomas Brown's going to get some interviews around the league, whether for OC or head coach. But Thomas Brown's story is not over yet.
And let's say this too, that having multiple good options is a good thing, because once you get into competing with the other franchises, there's a lot of other things that might come into play, right? So let's say there's 7 openings or 9 openings or whatever it's going to be. That's a lot of coaches that have to get hired. There's only so many candidates that are a good fit for your organization, but there's other, franchises that are going to go after those same candidates. Ben Johnson's going to get all of the interview requests. Like he's going to be asked to interview everywhere, and he can start eliminating teams. He doesn't have to interview everywhere, but he'll probably go down to Jacksonville and interview there. Why wouldn't you? You've got Trevor Lawrence. That's pretty attractive. You've got an owner that has a lot of money, but he can certainly pay whatever salary demand that you have. But we've also heard some rumors that maybe Bill Belichick might be the guy to go down to Jacksonville, right? So now you start to play the game. Well, are we cheering for Jacksonville to hire Bill Belichick? Because there's no way Bill Belichick's coming to Chicago. That's not a good idea anyway, but that's not going to happen. But if you're Ben Johnson, what are the jobs that are good enough for you to take? You're not just taking any job. You got to take the right job, because you're the belle of the ball, right? You're the top candidate. So as the Bears, they have to kind of go in with the same mentality, the opposite direction. They're the belle of the ball. They have to believe that they are the best landing spot, because they have the number 1 overall draft pick, Caleb Williams, who's, to me, looking like everything the number one overall pick can be in flashes or in sometimes sustained sequences, but hasn't been able to put it all together for whatever reason you want to put out there. And so if I'm a talented offensive coordinator and I'm starting my head coaching career, the number one thing that I'm thinking about is who am I going to get to work with at quarterback? And if I'm watching Caleb Williams, which Ben Johnson had a front row seat to do yesterday, right? If I'm watching Caleb Williams do to my defense what no one else has been able to do this year, I'm probably sitting there looking like, I think I could probably win some football games with this guy, right? Like I could do something. And I think that's what it comes down to for a lot of these guys. Maybe Kyle Shanahan is, I just need to be the joystick, right? I just need to have somebody that I can play. Maybe you can say the same thing about Sean Payton and Bo Nix right now, right? Like there's certain guys who are like, hey, I can pretty much direct a quarterback that's functional in this offense and make it work. But then I think about Sean Payton and Drew Brees, right? Like if you get that level of talent, you can win a heck of a lot of football games. You can win championships, like have that pairing and work with that player throughout his career. Young coach, young quarterback. I mean, you pair that, you're competitive for the next decade plus.
Yeah, I mean that's it. I mean it's like you said, Ben Johnson will have his choice, right? And we already heard some, there was a spattering of rumors that he didn't want to. We heard both that he wanted Chicago last year, right? We heard that rumor. We also heard the rumor where he didn't want to go there because of the dysfunction that's going on with the franchise. But like you said, at the end of the day, he just saw Caleb Williams light up the defense, do something against his team that no quarterback has done this year. 3 touchdowns in the second half, 222 yards in the second half. Brought them back when that game was dead. That game was over. At halftime, it was done. It was like 16-0. I think it was a half. It was just, there was nothing there. The Bears had run like 11 plays. They had 1 first down on their own, 1 first down they were gifted because of a penalty. That game was done. Caleb said, let's go, put on my Superman cape, and let's do what I have to do here. And he brought them back. And it was just these 3 games here against the NFC North. He had some fantastic numbers in those 3 games. So if you're the Packers, if you're the Lions, if you're the Vikings, and you saw what just happened to your team, look, the Bears have been bad for a long time now. But if you're fans of these other teams in the division and you're looking at it, you're like, man, I hope they don't get the head coaching right, because they got the quarterback. If they get the head coach right, if they start righting this ship, then, Ryan Poles is old. What did he say when he first took the gig? We're going to take the North and never give it back. That's been pretty bad so far, but he's got the quarterback. Let's get the head coach. So let me ask you this. The last time they had this coaching cycle, this hiring cycle in Chicago, there was the consultant whole thing, the whole mess. And here's our coaches. Here's our GMs. Let's pick from this group. We have it whittled down here. This is going to be Poles' hire. I'm sure he'll have some influence with Kevin Warren, but there's no consulting firm coming in. They're not going to hire the 33rd team to come in and give them a list of candidates. No Josh McGowan is coming in this time, right? It's going to be Poles' coach, right?
Yep.
And there's a lot of guys that they want Poles out too, because they feel he was the guy that allowed this to happen. But we don't know that, right? We don't know who decided to keep Flus last year. Maybe Poles wanted him out. Again, we heard conflicting reports. Some say Poles wanted Flus to stay. Some say Poles wanted to make a change. I can't see Poles not having the football IQ to realize it's time to move on. But if the management says, if his owner says, the chairman says, hey, let's roll with it. We got a 5-year contract on Flus. Let's give it 1 more year, see if it works out. I can see him rolling with it, but it's a huge hire coming up here in January.
So what was the question?
I don't remember. I was just ranting.
I know you were saying, let me ask you this, and then you were just really excited.
You think that this is going to be Poles' guy? You think he's going to be able to lead this search on his own like a big boy?
I think it's him and Warren. And to recap, and we've talked about this a lot. The last time they hired Ryan Poles, and then they gave him 3 people to interview. And it was Dan Quinn, it was Matt Eberflus, and
Jim Caldwell.
And You can argue that he chose poorly from those three. I mean, I think I would rather have Dan Quinn than Matt Eberflus, but I don't know that I love Dan Quinn as a head coach either, right? Like I think that that's what you get when you have the consultants and the George McCaskey involved and interviewing head coaches and all that. But if you look back to the last cycle, which is unfortunate that we have to do this, but if you look back to the last cycle, they let Ryan Pace go out and they did the same thing to Ryan Pace, right? They hired a young GM and they said, hey, here's a short list of guys that we really like, include John Fox, right? Like he didn't interview a lot of guys. Like they kind of paired him up, hired John Fox. Clearly, John Fox wasn't his guy. He didn't tell him he was drafting Mitchell Trubisky.
Yeah.
I mean, like you can't make that stuff up. And so he couldn't wait to fire John Fox, got him out, hired his guy and Matt Nagy, right? Now, I would say that it felt a little more real that Poles liked Eberflus and was trying to build it with him. But like you say, he's football savvy enough to know that this guy wasn't going to take him to the promised land. The report from Brad Biggs that said, actually, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I thought it was a 4-year contract for Eberflus is actually a 5-year contract. That to me changed everything. There's no way in my mind that Poles could have reset the coach with the quarterback at that point, because 3 years left on a contract that I just can't see the McCaskies going for it. Right. And so he was always coming back, in my opinion. Now he's gone. Great. Over. Now it's Poles. And I would assume Warren is going to be in the interviews. Fine. And yeah, I think this is his guy. This is what's going to be tied to him for the rest of his general managership. This is your coach. And so it's the most important hire. I don't know, man, since they brought in Ditka. I mean, like, you have the guy at quarterback. And if it doesn't work this time, it's not going to work. Like he has all of the talent and the drive. And like, I mean, that Caleb Williams is fired up. Like when they make a play and they're coming back, like he is fired up. Like he's everything this fan base loves. Maybe there's some that haven't embraced him yet. I don't care. That's fine.
There's still a few out there. Oh my God.
He's got it. Like if you're just watching what's on the field, like he's got that, all of those like things that you love in a quarterback, and he's so talented. So this is the most important hire. And if you don't get it right, it's never going to get right.
Yeah, this is it. I mean, he's going to be, this is his legacy, right? This is his legacy as a GM. If you get this wrong, there's a lot of comments in the chat, and this is also social media everywhere. They really believe Thomas Brown is going to be the guy because the McCaskies tend to go cheap a lot of times in their head coaching gigs, so I don't know, man. It's like, we know that the franchise is a little light on cash, with this whole Arlington Heights debacle and this whole where they're going to build the stadium thing is kind of all over the place. And, we've kind of seen them do this, with coaches in the past. Like you said, they kind of hold on to them a year longer because Trestman's the only guy they fired with more than a year on his deal. Everyone else, they no, let's hold on. Like Fox should have been gone, a year before. Nagy should have been gone the year before. Flus should have been gone, but they just didn't do it. So now they finally did it. They bit the bullet. They eating all that cash. They're eating all the Waldron cash. They're going to eat all the staff cash of the offensive guys they brought in. It's a ton of money they're wasting here. Will they now go ahead and say, look, Ryan Poles, if Ben Johnson's your guy, yeah, here's the contract that he needs to get the job done. I'm not sure if they're going to do that. I hope I'm wrong, but this is the Bears we're talking about.
Scared money don't make money, Lester.
Right?
Now's the time. Now's the time. Take that equity payment if you need the cash flow. Sell Arlington Heights to raise the money. Whatever it is that you need to do, but like now's the time. You want to bring the Bears back? Now's the time to do it. All right, the Barely a Podcast is over a half an hour because this felt, pent up. This was something that we were very much wanting. Maybe me more than anybody that I know. So, I mean, when I get congratulation texts when something like this happens, I suppose I've been talking about it too much. So I'm excited to turn the page, and I'm very curious to see what an open coaching search looks like. And I do think that having Caleb Williams and having some of these young core pieces in place is going to be very attractive to whoever takes this over. So I think that they are going to be probably the most attractive option of the job openings. I just can't imagine that anybody's going to have a more attractive job opening at the end of this year. That's just my opinion, though. We will see where it goes. But now we have exciting off-season material to look forward to.
Finally, the Bears aren't going to give it to us as on the field, but the drama of the coaching search will be nice. This is it, man. He's got to get it right this time. Caleb is the guy. It's clear to me. It's been clear to me since the pick. I mean, he was consensus number one. There was a lot. Oh, Jane Daniels, this or Bo Nick. Come on, get out of here, dude. Caleb's been the top quarterback in the class for years. He was always going number one overall. You know, he was going to always struggle out of the gate because that's what happens. You know, they're trying to give him a lot early. He's a pro. Let's do it. You know, we're now finding out some stuff with Waldron behind the scenes where you're just like, how the hell did this guy fool everyone, right? They made that change. Brown's in. The respect level's there. Let's keep it going here. Again, my fear is that something may lack here with Brown, you know, being in charge of it all. But hey, maybe he'll just kind of be, you know, a little more hands off of certain aspects. Focus on Caleb, you know, obviously, but then, you know, let's see how his end of game management goes. Because look, that we talk about a low bar with the quarterback records. Doing better than Eberflus in late game situations, doing better than Flus in challenge flags. That's the lowest of low. So that's a low bar that Thomas Brown's going to get over here. You know, hell, he has to win one challenge in his last few games to surpass Eberflus. So,
yeah, I mean, you know, the worst winning percentage in one score games probably in like I would think someone tweeted that out. It was like 212. 221 coaches or something like that with a minimum number of games. And he was seriously last. He was 221st, whatever, you know, the last place. That's coaching. That comes down to coaching. And the reason why I like Kevin O'Connell, if you watch Vikings games, they're winning games they shouldn't. Yeah. Like they're winning games that like, you're like, how did they end up on top there? It's like coaching decisions, those little things, those little inches, they add up, right? So that's the kind of guy that you need next. The kind of guy that can win before the game starts because he's got a good plan, win in the locker room at halftime because he knows the adjustments he needs to make, and then win throughout the game by finding those hidden feet and inches throughout the game that all add up at the end, right? That's what you need. And I don't know if this Flus was good at any of those things, but he was very demonstrably terrible at the in-game management stuff. And so I'm not going to miss this guy. Nagy, I kind of liked on some level. I don't think he ever understood how to connect the passing game and the running game. Like, you know, we don't have to get into Nagy, but like, you know, there's something there. Like he had some good moments for the Bears. This guy, it never showed up. So happy that he's gone. We can celebrate. Enjoy your guys' weekend. We will be back Monday.
We will
to talk about this game
on a real Bear Imbalance. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do a real Bear Imbalance on Monday. Why not? And we'll talk about the game and try not to just focus on this, but we wanted to make sure we hopped on here and did this. Guys, go stimulate the economy. You know, spend some money. It's Black Friday, and enjoy your weekend, holiday weekend, and we'll see you back here next week.